Hey everyone, Bradley Stalder here with Player Profiler, and I've got some week winning stats here that'll help you launch strong into week 3. But maybe you're feeling a bit down from the first couple weeks. This, post wedding depression, like the honeymoon phase is over and the realities of married life is setting in. Well, that might be true, and it might be mirrored in your fantasy leagues to start this season. Injuries have hit hard. Aaron Rodgers out for the year. J.K. Dobbins out for the year. Nick Chubb out for the year. The last one, Nick Chubb, really hurts my fantasy teams. Plus, we've also felt the injury bug from Christian Watson, who's missed 2 games. Travis Kelce missed week 1. Andrews missed week 1. Cooper Kupp is on the IR, and Deontay Johnson just joined the IR just a couple days ago. They've missed games due to injury. I feel like someone didn't toggle off injury mode, right? Those injuries have really hurt our fantasy teams through the first couple weeks. But maybe it wasn't injuries. Maybe it was just surprising bust games, right? The T. Higgins 151 air yards, but 0 fantasy points. Or the Drake London goose egg in week 1. Or maybe it was the Breece Hall bust game in week 2. Those performances could have cratered your launch into the fantasy football season. So you might be experiencing some post-draft depression. But fear not. I'm here to help you bounce back. In this video, I'll break down some key statistics from the first 2 weeks to get your team on track for week 3 and beyond. Let's turn things around before it gets too late and get your season on a winning track. The first stat that I want to share with you is that the Indianapolis Colts have allowed, on average, over 32 fantasy points per game to wide receiver and tight end groups combined over the first 2 weeks. The Colts have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to the wide receiver and tight end groups, including some blow-up performances. So Calvin Ridley, over 24 fantasy points. Zay Jones, over 16 fantasy points. Nico Collins, over 27 fantasy points. Tank Dell, over 20 fantasy points. And we'll throw in the dusty Robert Woods, still scored over 13 fantasy points against the Indianapolis Colts. And now the Colts, they travel to Baltimore, face off against the Ravens, who rank top 12 in points per game, yards per game, and yards per play. And that's with the Ravens off to a rough and tumble start so far. At least in our estimation, we thought that they would be full on launched. But even with a rough and rocky start for the Ravens, they're still in that top tier of points scored. And now they get a juicy matchup. Enter Mark Andrews, enter Zay Flowers, both players with over a 24% target share through the first 2 weeks. Those 2 players are auto starts. And this matchup also makes Rashad Bateman and Odell Beckham flex considerations. We'll monitor Bateman's ankle and his health going into week 3. But both players, if they're healthy, are flex considerations in this very juicy matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, Andrews and Flowers are starters, but Bateman and Beckham could be flex considerations in this matchup. Stat number 2, the Vikings have passed on nearly 78% of their plays through the first 2 games. No team has exceeded a 68% pass rate over the last 12 seasons. Pass volume plus Kirk Cousins' efficiency has elevated every single pass catcher in this Minnesota Vikings offense. Justin Jefferson, who was drafted as the wide receiver 1, is still the wide receiver 1. Jordan Addison was being drafted in the wide receiver 28 to 32 range and beyond, is the wide receiver 18 on the season. KJ Osborne is the wide receiver 51, which with a top 36 wide receiver finish last week. And TJ Hawkinson is the tight end 1. And they've all met or exceeded expectations. Enter a week 3 matchup against the Chargers, who've allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. This is a recipe for fantasy shootout success. Start all of your Vikings with confidence in week number 3. The third stat is that James Cook ranks in the top 12 among running backs in total rushes, rushing yards, yards after contact per attempt, and missed tackles forced. The question of whether James Cook would be the lead back for the Buffalo Bills, it's been put to rest. Not only is James Cook handling the rushing volume that we see from running back ones, his 13.3% target share is also ahead of the pass catching profiled running backs like Rashad White, Ramondre Stevenson, and DeAndre Swift on the season. So Cook's efficiency metrics plus his volume project for an elite season. Cook is a set it and forget it running back one the rest of the season. Don't get cute. Don't get cute. You are starting James Cook. And the last statistic that's going to launch your team into fantasy victory, Hunter Henry is playing 62.6% of his snaps out of the slot. And among tight ends with at least 5 targets through week 2, only Mark Andrews and Mike Gesicki have a higher rate of routes run out of the slot. It's no surprise then that Henry ranks 3rd in targets and 2nd in fantasy points per game. Henry hasn't played more than 60% of slot snaps in any season except 2021, when he finished as the tight end 9 overall. Henry is on track to repeat as a top 10 tight end yet again on a New England Patriots team that's desperate for offensive production. Ramondre's kind of disappointed a little bit. There's been some wide receiver issues with Devontae Parker being out for a game and Juju underperforming. It's just not been great. So the most consistent fantasy option and real life NFL producer for the New England Patriots is Hunter Henry, who ranks 2nd behind only Darren Waller in tight end receiving yards through week 2. Continue to start Hunter Henry as a solid tight end 1 moving forward. And as we're going into week 3, it's time to take action. In a season that's seen its fair share of surprises already, with surprises, setbacks, injuries, bust games, it's important to remember that fantasy football is this marathon. It's not a sprint. We've got 16 more weeks of this craziness, of this fun game that we love. And while injuries and unexpected performances might have derailed some of your initial expectations, there's plenty of time to make up for it as we head into week 3 and beyond. You are armed with these statistics from the first 2 weeks, and you have the tools to make strategic decisions that can turn your fantasy football season around. And look, I've highlighted some favorable matchups for you. I've highlighted some statistics for you. It's time to adjust your lineups. It's a time to attack the waiver wire. Trust your ability to bounce back. Remember, every season has its ups and downs, but it's how you navigate these challenges and you make decisions moving forward that allow you to bounce back and get into it. Being 0-2 is not a death sentence for your fantasy team. Stay engaged. Stay confident, work together with me, watch these videos every week, and we will continue to aim for the championship. Cheers to better weeks ahead and a triumphant return to winning ways. Best of luck in week 3, everyone. We'll see you into week 4.